Hope everyone is breathing stage in the GST. We had a couple of programs before starting today's circles. I have an announcements. 14/7/2017 we have a Mantana discussion on draft labor code on social security and welfare. C. S. Saraswati Kasturirangan and C. Amarnath Ambati is going to address. And in a special program we have a 19/7 Wednesday awareness program on professional opportunities for CAs in public finance and government accounting. C. Ashok Rao and C. Panaraj will be having their sessions. So many other programs is listing out. Kindly visit the Bangalore branch website. Coming to the today's study circle, we have an today's study circle FDI foreign direct investments. We have a well-versed, well-experienced speaker for the today's sessions, CA Sailesh K. I request Bangalore branch chairperson CA Geeta Evi to escort today's speaker and present a flower bouquet. I welcome all the members for this study circle. C.S. Sailesh studied at National College, Jayanagar, Bangalore, where he completed his BSc degree and then his postgraduate diploma in business administration from Bangalore University. He has completed the Chartered Accountancy course in 1997. He started his working career with Biocon India, where he worked for a brief period and then moved into the banking sector. He has over 2 decades of banking experience with him. He has worked at ANJ Indians Bank in its International Service Division of Corporate Banking till August 2000 and then joined HDFC Bank Limited to start their trade finance operations in Bangalore. He also handled areas like forex, depository services, loan servicing during his 5-year tenure. C. A. Sailesh, he has joined in September 2005. He joined ICICI Bank Limited to handle trade and forex sales in Karnataka and Kerala. He is currently working with ICICI Bank as a regional head, institutional business at the bank for Karnataka. And C. A. Sailesh is married to Smita, who is also a practicing chartered accountant. Sailesh is a cricket lover, likes travel, chess and other games. With this brief introduction, I present before you C. A. Sailesh.
Geeta ma'am, chairperson of the Bangalore branch of the institute, and Mr. Kore for your kind introduction, and welcome all of you, colleagues of the CA fraternity and students. At the outset, ma'am, congratulations on conducting a very nice GST seminar. I know GST is a talk and flavor of the season at the moment. A slightly different topic for all of us today on FDI. When I put some thoughts together on this particular topic on foreign investment, FDI being part of it, of the foreign investment part, I've also taken necessary inputs of what practicing CAs or people in employment and as a study circle aspect students would ideally like to know on this particular subject. I've taken some inputs from the Reserve Bank of India too, from the FED, as to what possible message I could for them pass it on to, or possible errors or clarifications which they frequent from the CA fraternity at large. My own compliance team of the bank is what I've put some thoughts together. Of course, within the framework of the RPI circulars that we have on this particular subject. So that's how I've constructed it. As from an agenda perspective, I've also included, post this discussion and inputs that I did receive, that we are also, I think, CAs are a little keen to find out what on trade credits as well as ECPs. So briefly, I'll try to cover these 3 aspects and also take your questions to the best of my ability, possibly towards the end of the discussion. You can please note down your points, and just in case there are issues that I'm not able to address, I will note down possibly your mail ID or telephone, and I'll come back to you. So we'll construct it that way. So starting with some briefs, I have got some historical latest trends just to put the topic in context. India is the fastest growing investment region that we've seen on this particular space. FDI is a non-debt finance product which we've seen essentially, and we're talking about foreign investment to a certain state. FDI is a subset of the foreign investment which we have largely seen. In this government, which has come into power from I think 2014 to 17, if I have to also brief you, we've had a liberalization of this particular FDI policy. A lot of reforms have come about it. There has been certain sectors that have got opened up. We'll briefly go through that part of it also in this. One of the major critical things has been the abolition of the Foreign Investment Board, Promotion Board, which were ideally, most of these cases were getting routed through them. The abolition of the FIPB has helped clear proposals at least up to 5,000 crores, and that's a fairly large number of proposals that have gone through. They've created a single window approach there in FIPB today. So with this, what has happened is about 90% of the proposals have actually been cleared without going to FIPB itself. This can be automatically brought in. And the last, I think 10% of it, which are likely, where they need some ministerial references and clearances, are all that is left with FIPB today. You must have also seen there has been about some 10 or 15 or even 20 proposals of some large value nature, which is there in the last week or so in the papers too, you must have read, which is there, which is affecting certain ministries at large. So they have referred it to them and they are trying to fast track it. These have been proposals of fairly large in value terms, and hence they have been with FIPB even after the abolition of, so essentially it is above 5,000 crores types cases which are pending with them. Three black swan cases were there which did affect us in 2016. Brexit, the first one, the Britain exiting out of the European Union was the first that we experienced. In Europe, Britain and Germany are jewels in their own economies in Europe. The exit or the referendum which happened, and of course this year's, in the current context, Prime Minister May trying to prepone elections and then a hung parliament, and then she's trying to cling on to power with the Irish Democratic Party, etc. is well known. The second aspect which happened in November was again a bit of a upset, I would say, or a surprise. Donald Trump winning the US presidential elections, and on the same day practically we had our Prime Minister announcing demonetization too. So these three definitely had some effect as far as the FDI was concerned during that part of the time, maybe the later half of H2. The current scenario, still continuing with the FDI policy or the budget proposals which happened in 2017, there have been a fair amount of sectors that have opened up. Specific reference, of course, is to the rail infrastructure part of it, as well as defense, because these were all closed models of getting in funds. It definitely needed an FIPB approval because respective ministries were also involved here. Private banks, which was opened up to about 49%, and now even with the government rule that we have, it is to 74%. And insurance and pension funds, which were up from 26 to 49. In this scenario, we did see the FDI flows also increasing gradually. We did see a rapid flow happening from 14. I'm placing 14 from this government perspective. That is there what we've seen in the last 3-4 years. So March 14 as not as calendar years, as financial years, we did see a good ramp up of these numbers. It may not be as much this year as we're trying to say, because people are trying to be a little specific on what the cases are. We're seeing a lot of startups also in Bangalore, as the Silicon Valley is. So what's the flavor if you see in Bangalore? We've seen these are the industries at large which is there, and these are the countries from which we're seeing these flows coming in. Technology, whether it is with Internet of Things or artificial intelligence, or to give you some examples, whether it is Quicker, I'm giving you a flavor of Bangalore, or for that matter Flipkart and companies like that are in this technology space. Trading has been this place of single brand part of it, which is allowed 100%. Multi-brand, still the approvals have not come in, so that institutions like maybe Metro Cash and Carry or Decathlon trying to tap this particular market. Services sector is quite large. We've always seen the BPOs, the KPOs, banking, financial institutions, NBFCs all falling in this particular space. Education, to give you certain examples, possibly Byju's, which is here. Manipal Universal Learning is another case in study in this particular space. Healthcare, you have Practo, their products, their acquisition, which is quite large today, or quite a large number today. From a country perspective, we are still seeing Mauritius, from where a large amount of funds flow are happening. We are also seeing a large amount of private equity players based in Bangalore. Fair amount of them are pretty active. Just to take some names, maybe Sequoia, Axel Partners, ITG, Kalari Capital, etc. fairly active. We'll dwell a little more on the private equity space as we take this discussion here on FDI. Singapore, Japan, of course Japan, a lot of companies out of Japan out in Bangalore. So we will be seeing more funds coming in from Japan as we see the days ahead out in Bangalore. Not only at Bidadi, there's a lot of things happening, Pasos, Kotelu. So a lot of funds expected when Japanese firms are trying to settle out in India, out in Bangalore. Netherlands, US, and then Europe, of course, follows this particular trend of getting onto businesses. So foreign investments part of it is largely divided into these heads, which is FDI, foreign direct investment part, where we'll dwell a fair amount of it in this particular discussion. Foreign portfolio investments is the other part. This has largely been the strength that we've seen as far as the currency and the stock markets are concerned. A fair amount of funds, it's to an extent of about 23 odd billion, has come in the first 6 months of this year, and that's amounting to about 1,50,000 crores has come into the domestic market. Just to give you an idea of what happened last year, last January to June, it was about $1.2 billion, and that was about 7,600 crores. This year it has been 1,50,000 crores already till June. So fair amount of funds coming in, FIIs and NRIs, or the person of Indian origin. This particular sector has been bringing in a lot of funds. Foreign venture capitalists have been largely, these funds or investors, FDCIs, are SEBI registered institutions, far highly regulated. And the other investments, of course, G6, NCDs, etc., once again from the FIIs and PIOs, and investments on non-repatriable basis, that is into partnership firms, etc., where NRIs or PIOs bring in the funds. They have been from the residual part of the investments coming in as foreign investments to India. So these 5 heads largely cover the investment into India. We will be concentrating on the first part of it, that's on your left side of the screen, where we would dwell a little more on the FDI part, which is a subset of the overall scheme of things. Now FDI, with respect to the topic itself, obviously it's funds coming into India. It forms 2 ways of getting it. One is the automatic route without any intervention. You are free to bring them. Of course, it has sector specific. You will have to look at the sectors. But then it is largely, that is a place where you're getting in fair amount of funds. A large FDI which is coming in is obviously an FYPB driven government approval route. So you have an automatic and a government approval route. And people who are bringing in these funds obviously are residents outside India, needless to add. So whether they are an individual or a body, corporate entity, they bring it. They are bringing the funds as FDI into India. So just a recap or an idea of who can bring in these funds. A resident, we saw that it is a person resident outside India or a body corporate and incorporated outside India who are eligible to bring in. They are entities of Bangladesh, once again as an individual or as a body corporate, but this has to come in only through Bangladesh or Pakistan, which has to come in through an approval route only. You have, we did see on the PI as the portfolio investment part of it, where it is FIIs and NRIs who are bringing in the money. So it is only these 2 sectors where PIS is involved. They are qualified foreign investors. You define them in a situation where it is other than FIIs and FVCIs. They are registered with SEBI. So the other set of investors who meet the KYC requirements of SEBI is a qualified foreign investor, and of course the SEBI registered FDIs, as we already discussed. So these are the people who can bring in FDI into the market today. How are they bringing in? What are the instruments of bringing in this FDI? As we all know, equity shares is there. You have fully convertible. The word of mandatory has been introduced effective December of 2013, where non-convertible debentures or preference shares were allowed. Post December 13, that has been removed, and now it is mandatory that these needs to convert into equity in a finite date. So you have convertible debentures, fully compulsory, mandatorily convertible debentures as well as preference shares, and of course the ADRs and GDRs are the types today which we have where we can bring in FDI. These are a couple of examples where FDI can be made into. Obviously, the FDI can come into any of the listed or unlisted companies, private limited companies or public limited companies. Partnerships and proprietorships are not allowed on a repatriable basis, they are on a non-repatriable basis. And trusts, essentially VCFs is venture capital funds, which are again SEBI registered. So into trusts, FDI can come in only into these registered trusts which are cleared by SEBI. And of course, from an LLP perspective, once again it is through a government route. The process of getting an FDI, and this is where RBI has also requested me to convey a fair amount of it, because this is where some challenges and issues have been seen. It is getting sorted out, but then still there are some issues. There have been, yeah. 100% is allowed. Through the government route only. 100% allowed through the government route, not by an automatic route. Okay. I've just jotted down the process on getting this. You have a KYC which needs to be completed today. So just in case, as an example, it is your client. Your client's KYC has been completed by their own bankers in India. It is the investor's KYC that needs to be completed, and there's a format in which this needs to be done. There are 6 heads in which this needs to be completed or brought in by a specific SWIFT message. So it talks about the investor's name, the investor's address, the 6 points I'm talking about. Investor's address, identification number. It could be, if it's an individual, it needs to be an SSN number or a passport number, some unique identification number, or if it's a corporate or a different entity, buyer identified number. It also calls for the bank of the investor, the number of years that the relationship is there, and the account number, that all relating to the investor, not of the investee. So the receipt of KYC is critical. Now there have been a lot of issues that have been coming down to banks as well as to RBI in the absence of KYC or on the receipt of part amount of KYC, let's say 3 or 4 points of the 6 points come in, what is the issue? Now there are calls which needs to be taken, but ideally when you're filing your FCGPR, which I'll come down to as a process, you need this all points of the KYC mandatorily filed with RBI, which today all of you are doing through the EBIS portal. So receipt of KYC, all 6 points is mandatory and it is required. You can take a time, banks also can take a call on which you can get it. Maybe if the funds come in today, banks take a call on crediting the funds, but then receipt of the KYC on its complete form or in part form is important. The funds, of course, the financial amount of funds is MT 103. Banks have to be party to this institution called SWIFT. It's a society for worldwide financial telecommunication. So it's a body, all banks are part of the body. So the MT 199 and the MT 103 necessarily needs to come by SWIFT. It's not by a written copy or, for that matter, by letter. The RBI purpose code, I think this is fairly laid out, not much of confusion out here. You have specific RBI for capital account transactions and current account transactions laid out. For FDI, of course, it is P0006. Not much of an issue here because this is what the bank adopts while handling these remittances. Credit to the beneficiary account is done by the bank post taking necessary declarations of the purpose and the FEMA declarations, etc. Post credit, FARC is an aspect or document taken up in the eyes of law too for an inward remittance certificate, which is complete details of the transaction. This document too needs to be filed as you take up the e-biz portal today from last February 16. There have been a fair amount of instances, issues taken up within banks where the delay was, why it was not filed in time, as we give our timelines to the next couple of slides. That has been addressed with this e-biz portal effective February of 2016, where now you all can, or the company representative can load these details directly into the e-biz portal. The advanced reporting form is the first stage after receipt of funds where the UI number is issued by RBI, and FCGPR, of course, is the form which is which is to be filed. Will come to timelines, which needs to be filed after the allotment of shares. And FCTR is the situation where you have transfer of sales or sales happen, so it's a document when you file post the sale of shares. The end thing today, apart from identified, let's say you have a parent and the company out here as a subsidiary and things like that are fairly governed and controlled well, you're not having much of issues. But the trend that we have seen, or at least which is prevalent today with the private equity players that we spoke of, is a route of this third-party FDI that I've coined. Here is a situation, if I have to give you an example, that the beneficiary need not be a customer of a bank which is trying to handle this FDI. Let's take an example, the bank that I represent itself as an example. Let's say ICICI Bank, we are in touch with, let's say, Sequoia. I'm just putting some fictitious names just for the benefit of passing on this point. Let's say Sequoia in Mauritius is trying to bring these funds in for a beneficiary, let's say in Bangalore, which is, let's say, also the beneficiary banks with, let's say, Canara Bank. Now, the funds are not rooted in FX terms and Forex terms with Canara Bank. It can be through any other bank, and that's the importance here. It's much faster. Banks are able to assess this and credit and take calls on this particular space. So what happens is, let's say Sequoia routes the funds to ICICI Bank's Nostro, that is our bank abroad, in dollars for example. We are able to cite on SWIFT that the KYC and the funds have been transmitted. We take a call on Sequoia Mauritius. That's how the treasury rates are taken. And we convert and credit funds to the beneficiary's account with Canara Bank by an RTGS. So certain things which come out here is one, the relationship with Sequoia out or any private equity player out abroad, Mauritius for example. The other aspect is the FX rate. Now what happens to the exposure that we are trying to take with he or she not being a customer of the bank? What happens to the KYC? So we take this KYC too of the remitter which we went through the earlier slides. So we've taken that particular KYC of Sequoia, in this example Sequoia Mauritius, hold that on record, cite the funds. It is still not touched our account, you should remember, because US is after us. It has not touched our account as far as Nostro is concerned. But we've taken this call and crediting, converting, first of all taking a position in the market and then parting with funds too before the funds have touched our account. So this is the end thing which the private equity players in India is utilizing, and it is the order of the day today that this is happening. So time is saved, otherwise you would spend 2 more days on this trying to identify and wait for the funds to reach into our account, that is the bank's account, and then we identify the credit and then pass on this particular credit. MT103 and RBA purpose code, everything remains. A bit on the FX side, for the beginners on this particular space, on the treasury screen, largely it is on spot, so that's a T+2 situation to be in. We take calls on cash, that is today, the transaction date, or on TOM basis, or on spot basis as the client needs it. If you're taking TOM and spot, then we have a fair amount of time to handle this transaction, because we need to get the domestic companies signature verified to their bankers, etc. But if at the same day, too, we are able to do this by taking these calls. So FX call by taking an exposure is critical out here. No forwards are booked if you're looking at hedging transactions. Anything above 2 days is, is a forward. So T on a transaction date is value cash, T plus 1 is prompt, T plus 2 is spot. Spot rate is what is visible on the treasury screen of dealers. Any period after T plus 2 becomes a forward. Forwards are not taken in the FX space here as far as FDI is concerned. From a simple perspective that the agreement should ideally say that it has not been booked at the investor's end. If that line is there or the paragraph is there to that particular effect, forward contracts can be taken here, else forward contracts are not booked in India. FARC e-biz portal as far as ARF is concerned, whether it's an FCGPR transaction, it's a sale transaction on FCTRS, the same scope and the timelines continue. The reporting to RBI from a perspective of a company is this. Reporting from RBI from an authorized dealer perspective is that we have a fortnightly return which we take up, which is called our return. All inwards, outwards, and all transactions are covered through that particular return. Every dollar which comes in or goes out is reported by this fortnightly return, and that is the reporting which goes from an authorized dealer to RBI. The next part, of course, is critical as far as timelines is concerned, and this is another area of discussion with the Reserve Bank, especially in Bangalore. A lot of discussion has happened. One on the earlier part, the issue prior to February was disputes between banks and the customer. We have received funds, you've got the credit, or you've not got the credit, you have not got the FARC, we don't know at what rate has it got credited, etc. All that has been solved today. We're just looking for an FARC to come in from the bank and the KYC to come in from the bank from a customer perspective. Just these two documents are enough to go ahead and file your ARF, which is to be done within your 30 days from date of receipt of remittance. And from an allotment perspective, we are expected to allot these shares within 180 days, and filing of FCGPR to be done within 30 days from the date of allotment, okay, or 180 days which was earlier. And in a situation of an FCTRS, that needs to be done within 60 days from the date of remittance. So these timelines we need to remember. By now, I think from February 16, we've gone past, I think, 15, 16 months. That's what I understand from Reserve Bank also, is that it's fairly stable. I think the path is smooth, but then there's still some cases where it has not been taken up with the earlier cases. What I also understand, it has moved into a compounding situation with the Reserve Bank of India in a case where they are able to prove, either parties able to prove either delays have been there. But then yes, it's a avoidable situation that we are in with respect to compounding. Briefly, sectors where FDI is prohibited. Not very many cases are there on this that we have seen with lottery and gambling. It's all relating to speculation, so these have been specifically prohibited. Agriculture, plantation, the companies, etc. The last two relate to situations which is trading in development rights, which is real estate business, non-township sort of dealings, and retail trading except single brand. I hope all of you also understand on single brand. Single brand is a situation, just to give you an example. Let's say the manufacturer outside India, let's say Reebok is there. The Reebok store in Bangalore is able to attract FDI only if at a manufacturing stage itself it is identified as Reebok, okay, and then sold out here in that particular product. Now the manufacturer has another product, it may not be Puma, let's say Adidas is it's the same manufacturer, it would be considered as multi-brand thing here. So if it's a single product, it's allowed, 100% is allowed. If it is multi-product, still prohibited. From a reference perspective, this is what we can go through as far as the FDI part of it is concerned. You have the circulars, master circulars are not released by RBI regularly. So the last one has been in 2015 with the master direction which has come out. There are FAQs from RBI which will guide us also on possible areas of how we have to take these transactions. So capital account transactions from FDI, if we have to move on, is a situation where you have, I'm coming to imports now, and that's taking us to trade credits at large. Are situations where this is related to physical imports. This was also an area which had certain amount of confusion, and hence I was asked to also cover this in some form. Very briefly, of course, the rest. Trade credits, as I told you, it's for physical imports. Now, it's a situation where physical imports and the customer needs to have necessary funds to make this payment as you clear these goods. So, if you're looking for some foreign currency funding on these products, is where it is LIBOR related. So, it is lower interest rates, is where on physical imports trade credits comes into play. So, very briefly on this. These are credits extended to imports under the foreign trade policy, where overseas supplier or a bank or a financial institution abroad raises these funds for our importer clients. These have maturities up to a year and up to 5 years. I'll come to the difference between the two. So let's say, largely speaking, it's up to 5 years that we can cover. Supplier's credit and buyer's credit are two types of trade credits in this particular case. Buyer's credit is a situation where the Indian bank, for example, can raise loans outside India by their own branches or through any other bank and lend credit to the importer client for an extended period. Just to give you an example, let's say today the client of yours has imported, they have their bill of entry in place or the import is in progress. You can raise these loans outside India at a LIBOR plus spread, we'll come to the pricing too, and lend that into the domestic market here, okay, for a credit for a period of time, which is in non-capital goods scenario, it is up to a year, and in a capital goods scenario, it takes to about 5 years. So that is capital goods, you have a longer gestation period basically to recruit, commission, etc. and then deliver. So they're given a slightly longer period. So these quotes which you get from overseas banks are LIBOR plus something. The RBI limit, of course, is on a 6-month LIBOR is about 350 basis points. This is the maximum rate. But then rates today, just to give you all a feel of what are the rates available today, it is sub 1 or in the range of 1 to 1.2 is the rate today. So plus LIBOR, if you're taking at 1.46 today of 6-month LIBOR, you are able to get it around 2.6%, 2.8%. So pretty attractive rates at these levels of 2.6 and 2.8% on dollar terms, of course. When I'm saying dollar terms, you always have an option here to hedge these positions. So even if you take a half-yearly hedge by forward contract model and you go about 2.25, 2.3%, you add this to the 2.8 that you have, you're still in the sub 5% interest levels of lending. So rates are pretty attractive. The rates are, and for dollar funds are available today. So it's a good option that you can suggest your clients from a dollar perspective or any of the foreign currency perspective, subjected to availability of funds, of course, that we are able to, or each bank is able to raise outside India. There are situations where rollover within this period is allowed, of course. Rollover outside this period of 1 year or 5 years is not allowed. Rollover is coming into play because there are times when the foreign bank gives you a loan or availability of funds for a brief period, let's say 90 days. So you have to roll over this, that's the first 90 days is given from the supplier to our customer as a credit period, and then you may have to roll over 3 times. But then it has to be 1 year from the date of shipment. So you're controlled from that perspective if it's non-capital goods, and of course up to 5 years if it is a capital goods scenario. The ticket size is fairly large. We have not seen this sort of sizes, at least out in the Bangalore markets. This is $20 million is fairly large where we've seen these sort of import buyer's credit transactions or supplier's credit. Supplier's credit is a situation where the supplier arranges for this credit to a customer in India. It could be by a credit period, it could be getting in the money through our nostro, either way. But essentially, our customer will have to pay at a slightly later period of time, so that credit is being managed by both the routes. All-in cost pricing, of course, is the RBI limit of 350. This was applicable some time back, but of course now funds have become cheaper, and that's why I quoted a range of about 1 to 1.25 is where we're trying to, or we are trying to have, or availability of funds is there in this particular range. The third part of the point that we intend to discuss is on ECBs or external commercial borrowings as it stands. The RBI and the Government of India, under the policy of ECB policies, is largely by these 4-5 heads is where they're trying to control the policy, which is macroeconomic and market driven, and in particular sector specific here. We'll come to the sectors and the domestic investments at large. But largely, what are ECBs? These are essentially commercial loans raised by resident, raised for resident entities from recognized non-resident entities, and which should conform to these 4-5 heads. I've specifically picked these heads because these are the areas which have had issues with the ECB policies earlier. So we'll dwell with each of these heads, which is the minimum average maturity or the eligible borrowers, lenders, recognized lenders, the costing part of it, the maximum all-in cost ceiling, and the permitted and non-permitted end uses, because this is a product where end use is also monitored. What are forms of ECB? You have situations where there are loans, and the Indian banks raises money abroad and they lend it out to the customers under the guidelines. So you have loans through bank loans, as the RBI that we have. Buyer's credit and supplier's credit that you've gone through are also part of this. So here, if you have to just break and take you back, we have seen buyer's credit in an import scenario, which is, let's say, up to 6 months, it's freely available for you to remit. You need support, you have it from 6 months to 3 years, largely. If it is non-capital, 1 year. If it is capital goods, 5 years. So that's how it is. Any period largely above 3 years comes into this product called ECB. I missed telling you this particular point. And that is the period that we're trying to do in a non-product scenario. So buyer's credit and supplier's credit are, which are part of trade credits, can also be ECBs, tagged under the head of ECBs. You have the foreign currency convertible bonds or FCEBs or securitized instruments here, as far as the forms that ECB can take today. Like the FDI, ECB also takes the form of automatic route and an approval route. So there are cases which can go through automatic, and if what I mean by automatic is you file a form called 83 with your respective ADs, authorized dealers, and they scrutinize the form. It is just not form 83, of course, but it's primarily referred that way. You have your board resolution, you have your loan agreement, all the 5 parameters that we discussed are also out here. So this is scrutinized by the ADs, and this is sent to the RBI Department of Statistics and Information Monitoring, and you get your LRN number in, the loan reference number in. Okay. And it is only post LRN, receipt of LRN, can you get the funds in, that is in whatever foreign currency it is, in dollars or in any other foreign currency. The period which, or the guidelines, if the proposal is not meeting the guidelines of ECB, then automatically we'll have to go through an approval route. I'm sorry, you'll have to go through, yes, an approval route where the forms of the loan agreement and Form 93 are scrutinized by the authorized dealers. They decide that it needs to go through an approval route, and they forwarded it to the FED in Bombay. It is not handled at the regional office here in Bangalore. It is centralized in Bombay. and the FE in Bombay needs to clear or give their approval before it is sent to the Department of Statistics and Information Monitoring to get the RNA. So it's an extra step which is important. What are prohibited things and end users, we'll go through it. Minimum average maturity, one of the 5 heads that we spoke of, is the first one that we have to cover. ECBs largely have been placed in the 3 tracks. I wouldn't say 3 types, but they still call it tracks, where the first one is foreign currency denominated, which have minimum maturity periods of 3 years or 5 years. 3 years where situations are lower than $50 million, and up to 5 years, which is about $50 million. The second track or the second type of it are loan ECBs, which cater to ECBs with average maturity periods of 10 years. There's a calculation as far as the average maturity is concerned. The circular, ECB circular also gives us a proper Excel, which takes into account the drawdown dates. You could have different drawdown dates of an amount and different repayment dates too. So this adds up to where an average should be of over the period it has run, and that has to be a minimum of 3 years to be eligible as an ECB. The third track or the third type is of course rupee denominated, and this is again between 3 years and 5 years of the amount of 50 million, below 50 or above 50. The second aspect is as far as eligible borrowers are concerned. You need to be an eligible borrower to get an ECB. So corporates in service sectors is a new addition that has happened recently, which covers hotels, hospitals, and the software sector. Units in SEZ, SIDB, where they can lend in turn, they can raise and then they can lend in turn. Exim Bank under the approval route specifically, because these are large value cases. Some are greenfields too. Companies in the infrastructure sector, NBFCs, IFCs, and asset finance companies and infrastructure finance companies. Real estate investment trusts, REITs, and infrastructure investment trusts are specifically in the 10-year bracket. That's your track 2 part of it. Now, who are recognized lenders? International banks, obviously, because they're able to raise funds outside India. Multilateral financial institutions, your Asian Development Bank, your IFCs. Suppliers of equipment, where we see more of such cases currently today in ECBs, along with foreign equity holders. So amongst a lot, it is suppliers of equipment and foreign equity holders that we see. There have been cases with foreign collaborator cases also that is coming up. Pension funds and overseas transfer subsidiaries are of course helping Indian banks to raise these funds. The all-in cost pricing is the other point for which these periods has a reference to. So ECBs with a period of 3 or to 5 years goes with 300 basis points above LIBOR. ECBs above 5 years has a maximum pricing of 450 basis points over the 6-month LIBOR. LIBOR currently is about 1.45, and ECBs for 10 years, which is your track 2 essentially, is 500 basis points. These are the maximum rates that we have over LIBOR. All-in cost pricing has also an effect today that the overseas, even if it's a parent of a subsidiary in India, do not want to increase the equity capital. They definitely want to show loans in the books of the company. They want to make the subsidiary company stand on their own legs, in their own balance sheet, and strengthen their own balance sheet at least in the course of a period of time. So this is an initial step that they have. There were days when FDI part of it was even happening, or they were bringing in as equity. They are thinking aloud today as far as ECBs are concerned to stem that particular gap, so that the loans, once they're budgeted into the balance sheet, that brings a far more higher amount of responsibility amongst the Indian directors to perform and then take this as a loan and pay back the loan in the course of a period of time. There is a lot of gestation given there. You have a 3-year, you have a 5-year, you have a 7 or a 10-year ECB available today. So that's a fair period of time to get these loans back. The other aspect is that the foreign companies have funds available with them. The situation was to deploy those funds here at a slightly higher rate than their own base rate in the country. So if they are at 1 and 2 and 3%, you have limits here which can give you a 3.5 over their own LIBOR rates, or let's say up to 5. So that flexibility as far as pricing is also there. So it is not idle funds being passed down here, it is earning funds for them in the form of interest. And the third aspect is the ability to take this money or repatriate this money back legally and in a very comfortable way, because that is backed by a proper loan agreement, which has a drawdown and which has a repayment schedule. Companies are expected to stick on to that repayment schedule at large. What is the end use? End use is an aspect which is monitored as a working capital loan in India. It covers import of capital goods. It has new projects where the CCP is to be used, modernization of an existing plant, or expansion of plants of the company are all covered here. General purpose is another new point that the ECB guidelines has brought in. Working capital was initially prohibited from attracting ECB. This is being brought into the picture now, where you're having from manufacturing to hotels to hospitals to software companies able to bring ECB as working capital today. Yes, it is covered under 3 specific sub-points in which it is eligible. One, the parent has to have minimum capital here in the Indian company to exceed 25% and above. The ECB needs to have a minimum maturity period of 7 years, and there is no prepayment allowed of this ECB during this period of time. So import of capital goods, which is in some way part of the buyer's credit transaction that we saw, is covered here. New projects is completely new projects. Modernization is and expansion plans are additions which you are adding on capacity and things like that. While we saw the end uses, what are the end uses which are not permitted? Real estate activities other than the development of integrated township and affordable housing projects that we discussed. Investing in capital markets, on lending to other entities, that is receipt of the ECB to a company and then you passing on this particular ECB to another company, even if it is a group company, not allowed. Acquisition of land, this has been the primary situation here. A lot of cases have come about, whether it is, what happens on an acquisition of land. We are not a real estate player. I'll give you some examples. Let's say there's a company of yours in the manufacturing segment, but then wants to put up a facility, let's say by KADB land at Doverspet or Pinia or Hoskote or any of these areas, just as an example. Now there's a purchase of land involved and there's a construction involved. So this particular situation, if the company is not looking for an FDI, needs to go through an approval route. So there's a purchase of land and construction, as differentiated from a real estate transaction. We're not building flats or villas or apartments and things like that. It is a company building which is coming up, but purchase of land is involved. Acquisition of land specifically disallowed if it is you're only trying to purchase a land and leaving it there for a future use. ECB is not allowed here. If the construction plan can also be given and you intend to start construction in an immediate manner, then or post acquisition of land or registration of land, there you can get ECB, but this can be done only post an approval from RBI. It is not under the automatic route. Activities provided other than guidelines, which is not meeting the pricing or the valuation guidelines, are all here. What are individual limits? These limits, I don't think we've seen very many cases of these limits out here, but then this is what the the amounts which the Reserve Bank has prescribed. So hotels, hospitals, software companies develop miscellaneous service sectors. So the corporates at large are under this 200 million or equivalent means any other currency other than US dollars. Corporates not included above has a larger limit of 750 million that you can bring in. Entities engaged in microfinance activities are 100 million and equivalent to 100 million or up to $100 million. And institutions like SEBI, where they can receive and then lend in turn, are up to 500 million US dollars. This takes us to hedging, because these are long-term loans, fairly 3 to 10 years, and for all we know, currencies or the values of the currencies definitely change in this period of time. So hedging invariably comes into play. So what is the call here? It's prescribed that each company necessarily needs to have a risk management policy in place, and they need to keep the ECB exposure 100% hedged. So we will have to take this call, you'll have to recommend this to your clients. And of course, it's a duty of the authorized dealer who's helping you get the LRN number and handle this ECB for you to ensure that the hedging is complied with, and the monthly returns, which is in the form of ECB2, is filed, and this is communicated in the ECB2 file form. And if there have been the other situations is where the you've gone through an approval route, so there is an RBI approval in place, then mandatorily you need to have these cases hedged. And another new aspect which has come in with the provisions of ECB is this ECB liability to the equity ratio. These are not for cases for 5 million and below, these are for 5 million and above. And you have this ratio of 4:1 where the ECB liability to the equity of the company is there in the automatic route, and in the approval route where we take the RBA approval in place, it needs to be less than 7:1. Permitted securities, as far as ECB is concerned, is a situation where you are trying to take ECB as a loan, in the sense that your authorized dealer is trying to raise this as a loan, as a commercial loan, from a branch or bank abroad. So in a situation where the ECB is raised as a loan, obviously an authorized dealer will require a set of security to be given to them. Immobile assets of the Indian borrower, or mobile assets, or pledge of shares, and corporate guarantee or personal guarantee will have to be taken. Board resolution should be passed, obviously, for a corporate guarantee to be taken, and specific requests from individuals for a personal guarantee is to be obtained by the bank, which your clients will have to necessarily give the authorized dealers. Bank guarantees, letters of credit, standby letter of credit, SBLCs, letter of comfort, etc. are not allowed, or are not allowed to be taken as a security or to be considered as a security. Certain salient features on the ECB, apart from the 5 cases that we saw. Currency of borrowing, it can be in any free currency, including INR, in which it can be raised. So it could be dollars, euro, all freely traded currencies, euro, GBP, Japanese yen, CHF, etc. Parking of ECBs is another critical situation. That depends on where is your project heading. So you have lined up, you have arranged for the loan, and now it's a question of timing as to when you need to bring it in. From the date that you raise, there is an interest running. So it's a question of how you intend to manage. So parking of ECB proceeds can be done outside India, and it can be done within India too. So you have specific rated funds in which you can place these funds outside India. Similarly, you can bring it here as an example. You can place it with it as a fixed deposit, but for a period of 6 months before it can be utilized into your ECB plans. So you have a flexibility of parking it there after you have got that sanction, and you can either place it overseas or you can bring them to India too. Conversion from ECB to equity. These are covering either matured ECBs or which have been unpaid, etc. You have a flexibility of converting this into equity. Of course, the pricing guidelines, wherever the SEBI is involved, you need to take it is subject to pricing, guidelines as well as valuation here. From a listed company perspective, that is your client, obviously it is the SEBI guidelines which will be coming in. If it is non-listed in nature, private limited companies, of course any of the recommended forms of pricing followed by recommended by SEBI needs to be followed. Of course, it needs to be of an arm's length transaction. Reporting requirements or what needs to be filed with the authorized dealer and in turn with the Reserve Bank. We spoke about Form 83, which is the fundamental form, which has complete details of drawdown, repayment, all aspects of the loan agreement gets transferred here. So Form 83, which is signed by the company, by you as a company chartered accountant and as an AD, needs to be signed and submitted to the Reserve Bank of India. The Form 83, ideally with the loan agreement, which is signed within 7 days, needs to be filed. That's a very, very critical aspect. Else, there's a situation where you'll have to take this loan agreement or get this loan agreement signed all over again. One copy of the Form 83 needs to be routed through RBI, through the AD. Drawdown and levy of charges, this charges refer to the charges with MCA. Is only after the allotment of the LRN, because once you get the LRN is when you will be able to bring in the funds. So the drawdown happens from then. Even the first tranche of the ECB, if you're trying to bring it in, that needs to be done only after receipt of the LRN. So receipt of the LRN is a critical timeline which we need to follow. Levy of charges obviously is after receipt of it. The ECB2 is a critical monthly return which needs to be filed before the 7th of the following month. This is again certified by the company, the CACS and the AD, and filed with RBI. It's also a return where you will have to give the drawdowns that have happened during the month, if any repayments have happened during the month. Even if there is no transaction in that particular month, you need to file the ECB2. The ECB2 is where the RBI is monitoring each of the ECBs given under the LRN. There have been instances where refinancing of the ECB has been called for. Refinancing is a situation where the next loan, obviously, as with common sense, it has to be with a lower rate. The residual of the outstanding maturity is not reduced, that is, you're trying to maintain the average maturity period or increase the average maturity period. And fresh loans obviously should not be raised from existing Indian companies or banks abroad. Delegation of powers to the AD is again an input from the Reserve Bank here. That there have been fair amount of instances where I think the CA fraternity at large or the representatives of the companies are trying to touch base with the Reserve Bank. These clarifications are available with the ADs. You can engage with your ADs. These have been delegated powers at the AD level itself. RBI need not come into the picture in these cases. So I've tried to consolidate a set of scenarios or cases where delegation of powers have happened at the AD level. So this will help you basically engage with the ADs better and clear your cases and take to RBI for clarifications. Those are the cases which are not covered here. I have a couple of cases here anyway. Changes or modification of the drawdown repayment is completely given at the AD level. So the company wants to change the drawdown or repayment schedule within the period of time agreed upon. So the average maturity period of greater than 3 years necessarily needs to be met. Changes in the currency of borrowing. Now you are trying to change it from dollar for whatever reason. If raised in dollars or any other currency, you can do this. Change, suppose you raised it in, only exception here is if you raise that loan in INR. Because see, any currency other than INR is valuable as a developing country that we are. It's valuable for an exchange which is going out as repayment through these products. So if it is in INR that you have raised, then you cannot move this to any other foreign currency or convertible currency. You need to keep this in INR. This is the exception that we have. AD Bank, you want to change for any reason an authorized dealer, you will need to only take an NOC from an existing authorized dealer, give it, inform RBI, and then operate this, give this copy of or the original to NOC to the new banker and start working with the new AD. Changes in the name of the borrower, you have scenarios where the name change happens for whatever reasons. You have to just place an ROC certificate for the name change and move on. Information is required, you need to just pass that information over the copy of the ROC certificate. Transfer of ECB, this happens during merger, demerger, etc. So there is a transfer of the ECB happens to the new entity. So this can be done. Company acquiring ECB is the only important point there. That should be an eligible borrower. We did see what an eligible borrower is. So the company taking over this ECB needs to be an eligible borrower. Change in the recognized lender, like you have to change at the borrower's end, this is on the other side. If you have a change at the recognized lender, it needs to be as per the extent ECB guidelines, and new lender also needs to meet the recognized lender definition of ECB, and subject to the fact that there are no other changes in the ECB. Change in the lender due to this again is accepted. Prepayment of an ECB allowed, subject to meeting the stipulated average maturity period and all cost ceiling. Cancellation of an LRN. The scenarios where you had proposed, you had got the LRN number, post the agreement and things like that, but then you did not get the funds in, or you were not able to get the funds in for whatever reason. And if the ECB2 has been filed promptly till you take this call of cancellation of the LRN. So cancellation of the LRN perspective also the AD has a delegated powers to handle that. Continuing, a few more cases. Change in the end use of ECB. We have found a few cases on this part of it also. The proposed end use is permissible subject to the new end use also, or the fresh end use also being part or under the automatic route or meeting the automatic route guidelines. Change in the end use of ECBs availed will continue to be referred. Wherever you have taken an approval, you will have to again take an approval whenever you are changing the ECB. The reduction in the ECB value subject to meeting the average maturity period is allowed. Change in the all-in cost ECB allowed as long as it meets the overall pricing of ECB. And extension of matured or unpaid ECB, you need to have the consent of the lender and there is no additional cost to be incurred. We've seen a lot of startups. We are in Bangalore, the Silicon Valley of India as far as startups are concerned. There is a government's vision to take this to 10,000 plus startups by 2020, etc. The ECB guidelines also has an area where you can work on startups, so I thought this is, and we being in Bangalore, this is more pertinent so that you will have more such cases coming in as far as startups are concerned. It's not only equity and not only FDI. You have these cases, a lot of inquiries are coming in this particular space. This entity recognized as startup by the central government is eligible to raise as an ECB. What is a recognized startup by the central government? This is being post the liberalization that also happened. This has happened in 2015, where a company which is in existence for the last 5 years from the date of incorporation and has not had or has not reached a turnover of 25 crores is eligible to be called as a startup in the definition of the central government. So they are eligible to get onto ECBs too. Maturity period is 3 years. That continues, minimum average period. So anything, it's slightly a large one, so they have kept it at the entry level of the ECB guidelines, so minimum of 3 years. Recognized lender should be a resident of the FATF, that's the Financial Action Task Force. All the US, Europe countries are all involved here. They've kept certain countries like Sudan, etc. out of the ambit. but then otherwise all of them meeting the larger framework of the financial action is all countries are covered out here. Forms, they have given this flexibility here, which was prohibited earlier in the rest of the cases, where it is convertible or partially convertible debentures, and loans, form of loans or non-convertible cases are also covered here. So this is an exception and this is a benefit to the startups in general. Currency, any currency, including INR, is allowed for startups. Amount, again, there is a cap on this. Borrowing is up to a limit of USD 3 million. All-in cost, we have given this as a mutually agreed between borrower and lender. You don't have the all-in cost specific pricing which was given for the other cases, so they're given a flexibility again here. End uses, again, in connection with the business or the borrower is all that it says. So whether it is working capital, whether it is any of the other cases, end use cases, permitted under the ECB guidelines is allowed. Conversion into equity, once again at any point of time you can convert the ECB into equity. Mandatorily, since startups may not be well equipped as far as the liabilities are concerned, hedging is an aspect where it needs to be mandatorily covered because of the vagaries of a startup. They've just got past an ideation stage into a working environment. So hedging is always recommended in a situation where startups are raising ECBs. So they get the coverage as far as the exchange control movements are concerned. So from a reference document perspective, I've suggested these cases. You have the master circular, you have the master direction document, you also have the various FDI circulars to support you on this. So that's where it is. We would take questions on this as to whatever you have. You could also write down, yeah.
Whether ECBs can be converted to share capital?
Yeah, you can.
So do I need to follow again FDI rules?
See, the sectoral cap has to be there. See, when you convert into equity, you should know that FDI guidelines need to be met. So whether it is sectoral guidelines, we need to see, and it can be done. Valuation is as per SEBI, part of it is the pricing part of it, and valuation as per that is to be considered. Public limited companies with SEBI's guidelines, private limited company, as I told you, SEBI guidelines of course, but then it needs to be an arm's length business.
So for ECB loan, should you have a separate account to?
It is preferable to have a separate account. We, as at least the bank that I am representing, we have been recommending that from the perspective that let it not. See, it's a question of when you were trying to use the end users. At what stage is your project going in? So the recommendation has been that let us not mix that with your current account transactions.
But there is no compulsory.
It is not compulsory. It's a grey area, but we have been trying to keep them accounting as a separate thing from your expenses accounting perspective. Keep it separate. And the interest that you can earn if you're trying to place it is only for 6 months. So the drawdown needs to be otherwise appropriately adjusted, which is again with an approval with an AD bank only. So you have that flexibility again not to bring in that amount which is going to be idle and lying at the bank. And the situation also is that you cannot place this into an EFC account.
Yes,
Yeah, you have to mandatorily convert it and bring it into the account. So that period of bringing in the money can be managed.
So it can be parked in FDs also.
For 6 months.
For 6 months also.
Yeah.
Further renewal can be done. After 6
No,
months.
no. Maximum of 6 months.
That's all.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's why I said that drawal period we need to manage.
Okay.
If you're feeling that the project is getting delayed, then you delay getting the ECB in.
So ECB report should be filed, ECB 2 should
Yeah.
be filed till such time that repayment of ECB
Yes,
loan.
it's a complete ECB closure happens, you need to file the ECB too.
And who will be monitoring the utilization of ECB loan via rights?
See, it is obviously up to the bank and the borrower.
Okay.
So that's how they end use this, because apart from the company,
the CA or the CS needs to sign off, the AD also needs to sign off that we have considered the drawdown, the repayment, and the end use of funds for what you're trying to use the money to, and then you're filing this with RBI within the 7th of the following month. So it needs to be very closely monitored. If you're asking me who is to monitor, it is the borrower and the bank.
If ECB is not filed within 7 working days of the month, what is the penalty clause within this?
See, I have not, in my experience, I have not seen, no, I understand. I have not seen a penalty in rupees being given. At best, you will get a letter. So what happens is basically the AD takes over the responsibility of it, because they have a mechanism of a diarising mechanism, which is generally in banks like ours is released on the first. So you know which are the ECBs that have been, which has come in and which needs filing. So on the first or the second, a reminder goes to the client that you need to do it. So the ADs follow till the ECB comes in. I have not seen a penalty perspective coming in from RBI so far. But then there have been situations where ECB2s, a couple of them have been filed together. That has been there, but that's been to various other reasons. You've shifted the company, you've not been able to do it, etc. You've seen some cases, that's all. Monetary penalty, yet to be seen.
From an academic point of view, how do multi-brand MNC companies, for example, Unilever, PepsiCo, how do they manage their FDI? How do they bring in money generally, such companies?
See, you need to take an approval from the Reserve Bank to do it. See, on FDI guideline perspective, it is prohibited, multi-brand. So necessarily what you need to do is you always have this window going back to the Reserve Bank and trying to get an approval. So it's done by a specific approval.
And again, you have the clauses on how much maximum capital can be done. I mean, how much maximum FDI can come in through?
No, it can go through an FIBB route. So because the limit today, I initially said that FIBB has been withdrawn. But then because the institution is there, 90% of the cases go below 5,000 crores. So anything above that, and cases where it is not meeting the FDI guidelines, needs to be referred to the FIBB. FIBB will take it up with the respective ministries as a single window concept, clearance model, and take it through.
One more, again, this is a very academic question.
Yeah.
These days we hear a lot about masala bonds. So why would an Indian company prefer masala bond, or which is the best instrument for an Indian company when it comes to ECB?
See, ECB is from a perspective of the guidelines that you have. You have these specific things. I have not handled masala bonds, so I don't want to give you an incorrect view on it. If ECB part of it is fairly straightforward, you know, it's a question of meeting these guidelines. You have for these purposes, because it starts from there. It's not that you can get these funds in just because dollars or foreign currency is outside India. You can get it for all reasons. So the starting point is that if you're able to meet those guidelines, I think ECBs are fine. ECB is a good product to manage.
Given that all the purpose and you meet the
and use and all that is met.
So now, suppose as an Indian company,
right.
Now I want to borrow funds from abroad because
right.
it's a cheaper route for me.
Correct.
So what are the ECB instruments that I should explore, or it is very specific to a particular institution that you apply to?
No, see, if you're talking about raising ECBs and options, is that what you're trying to say?
Forms of instrument, which are the different forms of instrument?
As an option to ECB or with an ECB?
As an ECB.
See, as an ECB, you don't have very many forms now.
Okay.
There's just that one product.
Like an ADR or a GDR or something like a masala.
See, ADR, GDR are situations which is, you're trying to raise outside India. It's a certificate that is being issued, which is outside India. And ADR, for example, is raised by a US bank, and it is listed on the US stock exchange. That's the thing. The other one is this is a negotiable instrument, and that is a certificate given by a depository institution, GDR. So they are separate routes if you're trying to look at. See, but I don't think it will be as cheap as ECB is from a LIBOR plus spread perspective at the time that you need for these funds. See, there are situations where if you're able to raise equity, then equity has a particular cost of raising it. Definitely, according to me, far higher than an ECB is. And if you are able to raise an ECB, an FDI, that's a situation that it's a non-debt finance route anyway. So you will need that. You will have to explore this in different circumstances of where the client is. Is he able to raise ADR? Is he able to raise FDI? Look for FDI, that route, provided you're able to get that returns. Ballpark numbers is something like 15 to 18% today. Some people talk about 12%, etc. But then, as a ballpark, 15% returns that you're able to justify it to equity stakeholders today. If not, if you're able to raise ECB, then ECB is a far cheaper method of raising funds. But then there are purposes there. So it depends on the case actually. You can't generalize the whole thing.
No, I think I was asking a slightly different question. I understand raising funds, that is different. If I get an option to, if I can get an option where I can raise I can manage a foreign borrowing, I can manage the ECB, then what is the instrument I should bring? One will be loan, one will be line of credit, it can also be bonds. So, which is the best form of instrument I should raise?
Equity beyond a doubt, if you're able to manage the return.
Okay. Debt instruments.
Non-debt instruments.
No. Okay. Best instruments are equity instruments, what you say. Suppose it's a debt instrument I want to raise, from an institution. Which is the best?
ECB is one form, that is all that we could say.
An instrument under ECB?
See, ECB, I have to put it differently, ECB needs to be compared with a domestic borrowing.
Correct.
Okay. You need to find out, or you need to decide the costs and advantages that you have within these two, is where I would say on the debt side.
I think I'll pass to the next question.
Yeah, sure.
Sir, this one, for the real estate companies,
For
the real estate companies, what is the best route of raising this foreign funds?
See, real estate, if you can do it by FDI, like you have a lot of examples, if I have to quote it from the rooms here, say for example the Qatar investment arm of the government brought in for the RMZ deal. You had Singapore investment, government investment arm, Temasek, bringing it to ITPL, etc. So if that is possible, that's the best route.
And in the real estate, to what extent we can bring the FDI, this foreign investments?
See,
Like whether it be
the amounts are 5,000 above or below. That's the cutoff. If it is above, you need to go through the FIPD.
and whether this land cost will be added to the project cost, whether the land cost also will be eligible.
Land cost will be eligible.
Very small, no earlier millions of dollars.
No, absolutely. Those are RBI caps. We are not seeing that sort of cases coming up anyway, either in FDI or in ECB today.
So, a very simple question is, there are funds parked in the NRE accounts. If an Indian entity, Indian eligible entity, let me put it, gets funds from an NRE account in some lakh dollars or whatever.
Okay.
So, does it fall under this? And is there any criteria for loan funding or capital funding from the NRE account?
No. Not allowed.
Not allowed.
Not allowed.
Okay.
And NRE itself can be those propositions that we say. One was a non-repatriable in nature. So you're trying to bring in NRE funds. If you are, it is non-repatriable in nature, whatever the amount is. So that's why it stands. So no loans can be taken over that. I didn't understand your loan point actually.
So if somebody wants to fund a project or to either in the loan form or the capital form,
Correct.
From an NRE account to an Indian entity,
Correct.
I understand the repatriation part, but
Yeah.
was it viable in a given scenario? Or
Yes,
not?
it is. It is. But loan part, the second part of the question.
Loan or capital?
That's all.
That is okay.
That's okay.
Thanks.
You have a lot of NRIs today bringing in funds into all these startups and all these companies
So
today.
that's the reason.
So that is it.
I heard one similar concept from the developer, but I don't know to what extent that is true. So what he told me is there is an ex-investor in England or in abroad countries. So this is what he called is a standard letter of credit. So the ex-investor will park the funds in the abroad bank. You call it the Barclays or some next bank.
Okay.
So this Barclays bank will give to the Indian SBI where the client to the account.
Okay.
And the funds will be used by the Indian developer for his projects. So in case if there is a default by the developer, this SBI will collect funds from the Barclays.
Correct.
And in case of a default by the developer, and this ex-representative who is in England, he will be what is the Y in India. So he will hold the assets of the developer in India. Thus, is there any similar concept? Actually, I don't know.
I'll tell you. See, I'll have to give you a context to this. See, this is not for real estate transactions. Now, the standby letter of credit is like a bank guarantee. This is basically issued, most part of it, what you said is right. It comes in an MT 760. It's a bank guarantee equivalent. It is called in different countries, let's say US, Australia, Japan, etc. They don't call a bank guarantee. They call it by a standby letter of credit. So in your example, let's say the client in England, not for a real estate transaction, I'm talking to you for in other terms, has, let's say, Lloyd's Bank or HSBC in London wire in this MT 760, which is a standby letter of credit, to a party in India through its banker, SBI is in your example. So what happens here is that it is like a bank guarantee, so it has a fixed tenure. So let's say it's a 12-month bank guarantee. So banks, what they do in India is they take cognizance of this SDLC. It is a security, you don't take further securities. This is a bank guarantee. So they give the facility to the Indian company, let's say for 11 months. The balance 1 month is taken by the bank, SBI, to claim in case of default of the Indian company, not meeting their cash flows and not able to repay the EMIs. Now, the overseas client should have an ability, because he blocks his fund-based limits to get wire in this MT 760, the overseas applicant I'm talking about. So he necessarily needs to have limits to this overseas client to get this wired in. So it forms, from the Indian company perspective, SBI and Indian company who's acting on it, SBI can give fund-based or non-fund-based facilities against SBLC, and SBLC is a very safe and accepted method of funding in India. From a A-rated sort of a bank overseas, because it's not all banks that they go ahead and, because every bank rates another bank in domestically or internationally. So you have to take, the banks take this call, whether are we comfortable with HSBC, X Bank, because everybody has these limits every day. So you go down and block those limits and lend here.
So in this case, if an ex-company, if the ex-investor gives the 100 CR SBLC, which will come to the SBI in India, and this SBI will draw this commission and balance will be credited to the developer.
Correct.
Customer.
Correct.
Okay. So now in this case, interest this developer to whom he has to pay, whether to the banker or it will be to the ex-person who is investing the funds, or how this interest return on the investment, how the ex-investor is going to collect.
See, the method the banks have been following is like what you're trying to say. If 100 rupees is coming in, equivalent to dollars or foreign currency, of course, and let's say 9% is your interest rate, again, hypothetically placing it, 91 rupees is given to the beneficiary. That's how it is monitored if you're looking at fund-based method of doing these things. Because they would like to take the interest servicing upfront, and that is generally part of the proposal, which is internally discussed. Because they don't want it to get into, see, everybody is, at least bankers' perspective, NPAs is taking center stage today, and this is a strategy which they have been following for years. It's not a new strategy with the NPA management which is coming. So they take that interest upfront and then they give 91 rupees to the client. That's the model. And 100 rupees is what will be claimed if there is a default, or whatever interest if you have not been serviced to the principal will be claimed.
This concept is allowed, but not for the real estate company.
Not for real estate. Real estate is a complete project funding model, and if I have to tell you, it is again for large players only. the BNC are a little struggling in the current scenario, even before RERA has kicked in. So the project funding which is currently on.
And if it is a new developer, does he will be eligible to this criteria?
Pardon?
Like if he is coming, if it is a new developer, does he fall under this eligibility criteria?
Banks are not taking this call today as far as SDLC is concerned on real estate. That's what somebody had said.
SDLC is not allowed for real estate.
Yeah.
It's not allowed.
It's not allowed and it's not a call which is being taken by the banks today.
Okay. And is the interest rate significantly lower by to SDLC?
No, so, it is current market dependent rates that you have. Let's say for OD or whatever it is that you're trying to follow, domestic lending rates is applicable there. It is just the security which is held here. You don't have to give any specific security here because SDLC forms a bank guarantee instrument.
It is basically security is given at the offshore level. So
Yeah.
interest rate should be less, right?
No, it is coming in to India. You're booking it. You're not raising the loan outside India. It's a loan which which is raised by an Indian bank in India. So the Indian rates applicable to proposals or sanctions in India is applicable. See, these rates outside India is if you have an ability of raising a loan outside India through your own subsidiaries or through any other banks like we saw ECB or Trade Credit, etc. coming in.
What I understand is the offshore company can fund the bank through this SDLC guarantee,
Yeah.
and they can reduce your forex exposure significantly over there, right? To this, because instead of bringing in equity, they can provide a guarantee to the offshore bank over there, to SDLC.
And that's right. See, you don't have to bring it as equity, so this is a debt form for sure. There you're right. See, but then you should remember that the bank in India is acting on the SBLC. Which is a bank acting on the SBLC and giving the funding. It is a bank in India, it is not a bank overseas. The overseas bank is judging or issuing the SBLC on the strength of its customer in that country. Okay, it ends there. It can be a cash back, it can be a property or any security that the overseas party is trying to give the overseas bank. Once the SBLC in the form of MT 760 is wired in, the bank acting on the MT 760 is a bank in India. A bank in India will lend at commercially viable interest rates. And hence I was giving you that ballpark numbers.
Sir, I have one more question.
Sir,
Yeah, please.
whether FDI is allowed in starting petrol pumps?
For an Indian who
Okay.
is residing abroad, he wants to start multiple limits of petrol pumps in India.
Okay.
Whether the FDI is allowed.
Petrol pumps. Okay.
He is having already 23 petrol pumps abroad. He wants to have the same thing in India.
Okay. Now I may have to refer it because I have to look at it from the petroleum angle, whether it is allowed. I personally have not handled a case on petroleum, so we may have to check the FDA guidelines on it.
He has got one more thing in that. In the petrol pumps, he wants to have a small mark.
Okay.
Again,
Which is the
multi-brand.
main thing today. You know, you have ATM, you have malls, everything which is there today. But whether FDI is allowed and then single brand, multi-brand angle that we'll have to see. My take at this stage is not that I have not handled the petroleum case. I still feel from a case of a multi-brand angle, it is which is getting distributed or sold in that particular place, it might call or it would call for a RBI reference or an FIPB rule. Yeah, please.
Sir, when an advance foreign remittance form is filed, is it authorized dealer who looks at it or is it the RBI who looks at it?
It is the authorized dealer that will have to look at it. See, it's a common platform today. This is the EBIS platform where you or the company's representative loads it on the EBIS portal. The image comes to the bank's central office and the Reserve Bank of India. The UIN comes immediately because they are not stopping the release of the UIN. Earlier it was. Now the new model is the UIN is released immediately. but it is viewed by the central office of the bank, not by the independent branches of the banks or the ADs, and by RBI. So it is first ADs who will have to clear it.
Okay, so every bank
It is at the next stage, it's all the 3 stages too. It is at the ARF stage, the same thing happens at the FCGPR stage and at the FCTR stage.
Okay, it's always the authorized dealer and then the RBI.
And then RBI.
Okay, why
We
is
were reviewing it earlier, or any authorized dealer was reviewing it earlier in physical copies, and then there used to be disputes, delays, etc. And then it used to go to RBI on a physical form earlier. Now that has been dispensed with, where the company's representative loads in on the e-biz portal directly.
Is there any particular reason why it takes that long? Is it because there is so
Now
many
I think it is pretty
applications?
fast. Now it is pretty fast. That old delays have all been dispensed with.
Just
Prior to February 2016, these delays used to happen. Now it's pretty fast. And now, if in case you still have some delays, maybe you should discuss with the AD.
okay, just to give you an example, one of the forms that I filed, for resubmission, it came back after 45 days. So I thought that was a really long time, and I knew it had to come back for resubmission because I didn't attach a KYC because I didn't have a KYC, but I had an FIRC. So it took 45 days. So I think it's a really long time.
Well, that's a really long time just for KYC, because KYC and re-KYC are fundamental documents in FDI. The first check is that whether we have these 2 documents.
Right.
If these 2 are not there, it's bound to come back. But then this may be a stray case. We are seeing a far lower number of days currently which is being managed, and it's being welcomed across, including bankers and customers alike.
So it's at the central level. It's not at the branch level or where you received it.
No, it's at the central level of the bank. Like for example, private sector banks, it's all in Bombay.
Okay.
Just as an example.
I have another question.
Yeah.
This is relating to FDI coming in for e-commerce. And e-commerce, it's entirely allowed except for inventory-based models. And that was one of the reasons why Flipkart changed its model from inventory-based to market-based model.
Right.
So now, so there's a circular, I think, which was released in March 2017, which said inventory-based model you can't get FDI in, and they also said what inventory-based model is. Any e-commerce company which holds an inventory and a service. To give you another example, Urban Clap would be just services. So I had a situation where a company which did something which were very similar to Urban Clap, so they got a notice. Actually money had come in, and they got a notice from the government saying FDI is not allowed here.
But then was the amount credited?
Amount was credited, yes.
By the bank?
Yes. And then they got a notice saying this is not allowed. So now they had to prove themselves whether they are an inventory-based model or a market-based model. Purely going by the definition, they hold services but not really inventory because it's service-based. So in a situation like this, is it the authorized dealer who's supposed to look at all of this and credit the money or not?
See, no, it is the company who would know, because authorized dealer, if it's a remittance hits the account on a particular day and you are expected to act on it, authorized dealer may not go down to the complete business model of the company to decide. The company and the company's representatives gives, including the purpose code and what the purpose of this particular remittance is to the bank. So the bank is relying on that particular declaration from the company.
Okay.
So there's a code, let's say for example P2206, which stands for this capital infusion as FDI. So if that is the reason given, then the bank goes ahead with that. But then if there has been, I would wish that a discussion happened with the bank much before the funds came in, if it was a grey area with the company or its representatives. It being discussed with the bank, then the bank would have definitely come forward, maybe internally checked even with RBI whether this is possible, not possible, any grey areas sorted out, and then funds being credited. Even if you were to hold the funds for a day, it would have actually helped.
Okay.
Now, if it is applied, it is assumed that it is FDI. And then now trying to explain that the business model was different from the bank may not be right, but nothing is lost. You have to give these clarifications back to RBI. What's the downside? It is not allowed. At best, you need to return these funds. Okay.
Yeah.
If it is allowed, they would give you a letter that you need to be careful going forward, and basically they're looking for a justification now, and you will have to justify with the business model. Even if you have that services, justify it on those lines. The downside is the return of funds at best.
Okay. Thank you.
Sir, I have one more thing to say in this SPL scheme.
Yeah.
Normally, if I get 100 rupees and I'll be getting
Normally, I didn't get
I'm
it.
getting 100 rupees. This SBI or Indian Bank will give me a 91 rupees. Sir. So the balance 9 rupees is the interest for the SBI for providing the electricity. But what will be the interest of the expert, sir, who is giving the SBIC? How is the interest will be taken care?
That interest is not passed on to the Indian borrower, no? See, that is being supported or being taken by the banker which is issuing the SBLC in that particular country.
Yes, sir.
See, the servicing part of it is done only from an Indian perspective.
Yes, sir.
So the bank is acting on it without taking the security. So that is all this is taken. There, it could be far lower than 9% because 9% of lending rates are not there in countries, in developed countries, for example. So it could be a far lower rate, maybe LIBOR linked rate there. Essentially, they are blocking some security there and issuing this. So for which the cost could be in the range of LIBOR plus spread.
Thanks.
Well, members, on behalf of members present here, on behalf of Managing Committee of Bangalore Bench, I thank the Sailesh K for accepting our invitation and making this session very effective. I request Smita Madam to come forward and present a moment to the CA Sailesh. I thank all the members for your active participation.